Move over, Simpsons, because Family Guy's managed to predict the future on more than one occasion. That's why today we're looking at some of the times the show went full Nostradamus and created some crazy coincidences that have had us second guessing whether psychics are working on that show.
Psychic!
So let's first start with the light one, involving a cutaway in the episode Hell Comes to Quahog and one of the original members of the X-Men.
Honey, where'd you go when you went out last night?
Just over to Tom's house, played some poker, had some brewskis, you know.
So in this cutaway, Iceman lies to his wife about where he was, which ends up being a futile effort considering he leaves a big, noticeable trail of ice everywhere he goes. The one time a guy probably wished global warming would hurry up and superheat the Earth. Iceman's trail leads all the way to a gay adult theater, so I guess the kitty pride is out of the bag now.
At least they know how to touch a man! Oh, walk away.
This is obviously just a joke about Iceman being gay, and during the time this episode came out, that was not an identifying feature of the original character. In fact, he dated many prominent female characters in the X-Men canon, from the aforementioned Kitty Pryde to Rogue to Polaris. However, nearly 10 years after this episode aired, Iceman came out as gay. Well, technically he was outed by Jean Grey after she read his mind. Telepaths really have no manners. But this change has been a constant in the comics since then, and I guess Family Guy just happened to be ahead of the curve. It's impossible to tell whether or not this one-off joke inspired a Marvel writer nearly a decade later, or if the Family Guy writers just saw something we didn't, but it's a fact that the show is injecting some progressiveness into the character way before anyone else. Well, as progressive as you can be with a gay joke. And next is an instance of Family Guy referring to someone as another gender than the one they presented as, only for that individual to eventually change their gender years later in We Love You, Conrad.
Oh my god, you're Lauren Conrad.
Yeah?
From the hills.
Yeah, you seem surprised.
So the episode kicks off with Brian becoming romantically involved with actress Lauren Conrad. And yet Brian wants to distance himself because he doesn't want to be seen with someone the public considers dumb. Brian, being surprised by you dating a bimbo is like being surprised to find a fork in a kitchen. Unfortunately for him, Stewie is right there to catch him in the act.
Brian, is that you? Is that Lauren yeah, my god, I was shopping for hats. Hang on, I'm coming over.
Well, no putting the genie back in the bottle now. So now that Brian and Lauren are more or less an item, Lauren decides to take Brian and Stewie to the Newport Fashion Show, where they come across socialite Brody Jenner.
Look, there's Brody Jenner. God, what a douchebag. I can't believe that came out of Bruce Jenner's
So Stewie mentions that Bruce Jenner, an Olympic gold medalist who married into the famous Kardashian family, gave birth to his son Brody Jenner, amongst other future celebrities. Bruce did have a role in their birth, but Stewie seems to be a bit confused about the process of how that came to be.
Bruce Jenner is a man.
No, Brian. That's what the press would have you believe, but he's not. Bruce Jenner is a woman.
This episode was from 2009, and at the time, the person formerly known as Bruce Jenner hadn't changed their name or made any real public indication that they identified as a woman. God forbid someone try out a new hairstyle without being questioned about their identity. But this wouldn't be the only joke the show would throw at the former Olympian, as in the episode Grim Job, Family Guy would portray them as overtly effeminate.
I mean, you'd be evil too if your stepdad was Bruce Jenner.
Hey girls, feel my cheek, it's like a bottom.
And the show would have Jenner sultrily performing for sailors in the episode Lottery Fever as well.
Just wanted to remind you fellas what you're all fighting for.
Around the time of these episodes coming out, Jenner was still viewed as a man in the public eye and had made no real mention of identifying as gay either. Then in 2015, they officially came out as transgender in April before rechristening themselves as Caitlyn Jenner in July of that year. This was something Jenner had been aware of for a long time, even having undergone hormone replacement therapy back in the 90s before their marriage to Kris Kardashian. But in 2015, it was all out in the open now, and Family Guy couldn't help but take a victory lap over having their fingers on the pulse before the general public.
Bruce Jenner is a woman. An elegant, beautiful Dutch woman.
Clearly, the Family Guy team saw something the rest of the world didn't, and it would only take a few years after these jokes for their beliefs to come true. Maybe these jokes even urged Caitlyn to finally live her truth. Yeah, I doubt that too, but you gotta hand it to Family Guy for pushing for progress, even if it wasn't done in the best of intentions. And it's hard to say whether or not Family Guy was making a subtle prediction with music star Barry Manilow in the episode Back to the Woods, but his appearance did kind of foreshadow a reveal that would come way later in time.
Barry Manilow.
What a joke.
So stupid.
And boring as hell.
Yeah, no kidding.
So when the guys hear that Barry Manilow is coming to Quahog, their first response is to scoff at the idea of going to such a concert. After all, these are manly men we're looking at here. Men of this magnitude wouldn't be caught dead listening to something as sappy, romantic, or earth-shatteringly heart-touching as Manilow's music.
I love Barry Manilow.
Oh my god, he's the best!
I have everything he's ever recorded!
Me too! In my car!
Just kidding. Real men don't let traditional conventions keep them from crying with the bros over some heartfelt pop music. So they decide to get tickets to the concert to see the man, the myth, the legend in the flesh for themselves.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome!
For this next song, I'm gonna need some help from a member of the audience.
It's every girl and 40-year-old man's dream to be called up on stage to be serenaded by the Barry Manilow, but only if your name has 2 syllables. Sorry for you short-named folks out there. And while all the guys have names that apply, Quagmire ends up being the luckiest girl at the ball when he's chosen.
Quagmire! Wow, that's exotic. All right, why don't you come up and join me on the stage?
And so Quagmire earns himself a heavy on the eye contact rendition of Manilow's song Mandy, but with Quagmire's name slotted in. This could certainly be seen as a romantic moment if any of the 2 guys were interested in men, but at the time in 2008, neither of them publicly was. I know Quagmire's coming out one day, just gotta hold on a little longer. But as it turned out, Barry Manilow would announce his coming out almost a decade later in 2017. And this wasn't any kind of sudden epiphany. Manilow had privately identified as gay and even dated his manager for over 40 years, eventually marrying in secret in 2014. Manilow did this because he believed coming out would disappoint his fans, but he eventually decided it was time to put it all out in the open. We're not saying dreamily looking into the eyes of Quagmire helped him get there, but I guess Family Guy could take some credit for that if they really wanted to. And before the COVID pandemic, most of the population couldn't even begin to imagine what a nationwide lockdown would even look like. Yet when Family Guy put out the episode Hot Shots, they may have been hinting at what was to come.
Heartless corporations make billions of dollars by foisting garbage and poison upon our children.
So when Lois decides not to vaccinate Stewie after reading about alleged health effects, she campaigns for other families to do the same. This kind of mentality around vaccines has always been a thing, with many people believing that vaccines do more harm than good for a child's body. But these kinds of discussions skyrocketed during the pandemic, especially when a COVID-19 vaccine was finally tested and approved. They're kind of working in reverse here, as a lack of vaccines didn't cause the COVID outbreak, but it definitely shot the residents of Quahog in the foot. That's not the part of the body you get the shot in anyway. They really can't do anything right over there.
Your town is under quarantine. Until further notice, no one may enter or leave the city.
So the lack of vaccinations ends up causing a large outbreak of measles that leads to Quahog getting quarantined from the rest of the world. At least during COVID, we were all in this mess together. I hope the people of Quahog had something akin to Animal Crossing New Horizons to fill up their time with as we did. Man, all of my islanders are probably dead by now, huh?
I, for one, am enjoying the indoor family time.
The fact that the show picked measles as its choice of outbreak is also pretty coincidental, as measles outbreaks have been steadily on the rise in the US since last year. But similarly to the COVID pandemic, the quarantine ended after the arrival of vaccines in the town. It's too bad the rest of the world didn't get theirs delivered by Sean Penn. Maybe he could have mixed it up and delivered them as some of his iconic characters. Like the guy yelling about finding his dead daughter. That would definitely motivate people to get vaccinated.
Great, just what I needed, a lecture from liberal Hollywood.
This whole thing has been a lecture from liberal Hollywood.
While COVID didn't occur from a weakness in public health like in this episode, the fallout from the disease striking the world is eerily similar to what happens here. But something that feels really eerily like a prediction is how this whole episode kicks off, with a bat.
What is it? Ah! Ow!
Okay, maybe not eerily similar, but it's still a strange coincidence. The origins of COVID-19 are still up in the air, but a persistent theory has linked it to the SARS-CoV-2 virus originating in bats. While it's not really possible to transmit the virus from bat to human, it can be transferred from bat to another animal and then to a human, creating the COVID-19 virus in humans. Stewie doesn't get sick from the bat in this episode, but whichever time traveler they have employed on the writing staff may have just thrown that in there as a little wink. And the whole world was shaken up when Family Guy decided to kill off Brian in the episode Life of Brian, but it would also coincidentally premeditate the death of another Brian only a week later.
Brian, look out!
So Family Guy would make the controversial decision to kill off one of its most beloved characters, Brian Griffin. The move shocked the pop culture world at the time, even though it was expectedly reversed a few episodes later. Did anyone really think the show was going to cut Seth out of one of his paychecks? I don't think so.
I'm afraid that our Brian is dead.
This episode aired on November 24th, 2013, and less than a week later, another prominent Brian would pass away. At around 3:30 p.m. in Santa Clarita, California, actor Paul Walker was killed while riding shotgun in a Porsche Carrera GT that struck a concrete lamppost and a few trees. Both Walker and the driver, Roger Rodas, died within seconds. Walker was perhaps most well known for his longtime role in the Fast and the Furious series, playing a character named Brian O'Connor. Furious 7 was actually in the middle of filming when this accident occurred, leading to the production going on hiatus and the film turning into a send-off for the character. It was certainly incredibly unfortunate timing where 2 Brians were killed in automobile-related incidents, but only one of them couldn't be undone. And to be clear, Brian being brought back had nothing to do with this real-life tragedy. It was a decision that was planned out well in advance, as the Family Guy team couldn't have pivoted that quickly to change the outcome. It's an unfortunate moment in history where some pretty eerie parallels can be drawn from just complete happenstance. And it may not have been the most tight-lipped secret in Hollywood, but Family Guy made it pretty clear they did not think Ellen DeGeneres was a very good person.
We now return to Ellen only talks when her guest is talking.
So in case you're too young to remember, there was a time when the Ellen DeGeneres Show was one of the most popular talk shows in the country. From 2003 to 2022, the show produced over 3,000 episodes of dancing, prizes, celebrities, and giving nobodies their 15 minutes of fame. Seriously, they had a cashier from Target on just because the internet thought he was hot, and you thought the internet was the only home of mindless slop.
Are you just gonna talk over everything?
I love talking on TV. I'll do anything to talk on TV.
And this cutaway reflected growing rumors in Hollywood that Ellen wasn't the nice, cheery individual she appeared to be on TV. Dakota Johnson clocked her on her own show, but none of us could fathom just how dark things were behind the scenes. Okay, it's actually pretty tame by Hollywood standards, but it's still pretty bad. In July 2020, anonymous reports from alleged former employees of her show started to come out, describing a toxic work environment filled with microaggressions, racist comments, and possible harassment from executive producers. Ellen was described as cold, distant, and rude to staff in lower positions, but Ellen has denied that she's as mean as the report suggested. Nonetheless, 3 executives were fired in the aftermath, and Ellen herself apologized for not creating a safe work environment. And Family Guy certainly had its moment with feeling validated all those years later.
You can help save one of these abused and terrified grips from the Ellen DeGeneres Show.
And not long after this episode, a wife-changing experience was aired, the Ellen DeGeneres Show would end in 2022. Maybe Ellen just wanted to retire, maybe the accusations had destroyed her credibility, or maybe it was Family Guy's constant ribbing of her that made her want to step away. We may never know, but we'll always know that Family Guy was on the front lines questioning her credibility from day one.
Give today, because no one should have to spend Thanksgiving watching a millionaire try on sweaters.
But not every prediction of the future has to be bad. In fact, the episode 3 Acts of God sort of predicted that the New England Patriots would be able to turn their football seasons around, with or without a little divine intervention.
My God, 10 losses in a row?
This whole season's been one long bad dream.
So in this episode, the guys get fed up with the Patriots losing seemingly every game, and Peter starts to realize something ethereal may be afoot.
Isn't it obvious? God hates the Patriots. He made them lose again.
It's funny how God used to speak to people through burning bushes and nuking entire cities, but nowadays he apparently just rigs football games. He must have a DraftKings sponsorship or something. Now, at the time of this episode's conception, the New England Patriots were actually having a decent season. It was a season of rookies carrying the team through injury, with players like Julian Edelman and LeGarrette Blount driving the team to the AFC Championship game. But diehards and normies know none of that matters. What really matters is winning the Super Bowl. Unfortunately for the Patriots, they were in a bit of a drought when it came to Super Bowl rings, having not won the biggest game in the league in almost 10 years. Luckily for them, Peter and the guys are on the case to turn everything around.
Stop making the Patriots lose.
I'm God. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, so you admit it.
So the guys make a deal with God that if they can get Patriots head coach Bill Belichick to smile, God will finally back off from holding the Patriots back. But to be fair, this kinda seems like one of those camel through the eye of a needle impossible tasks.
Hiya, Mr. Belichick.
Who the hell are you? What do you want?
We are here to make you smile.
Just like, everywhere I look, I see his face. The pain, it's just too much. So the guys try everything, or at least everything they're willing to try to get Belichick to smile. But this man wouldn't know happiness if it slapped him in the face while wearing a gaudy Super Bowl ring.
You guys have been following me around all day, making fools out of yourselves. Would you just leave me alone?
Geez, no wonder this guy started dating a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. This guy has zero zest for life in his eyes. Well, that's not entirely true, as there is one thing that gets a chuckle out of him.
Our friend Joe here has to have his fluids changed every 72 hours or else he swells up and his eyes turn yellow.
Huh. What was that?
Yeah, apparently the suffering of others is what gets this guy's jollies off. I guess you don't win the Super Bowl without making a couple thousand grown men cry.
That's hysterical.
Oh my God, yes!
And with that, the guys finally convinced God to quit interfering in the Patriots games, and it appears that decision stretched into the real world as well. This episode aired in March 2016, and the following year at the next Super Bowl, the New England Patriots defeated the Seattle Seahawks in a close 28-24 victory to win their first Super Bowl in 10 years. Now, I'm sure a lot of players were thanking God for their victory, but not nearly enough players were thanking Peter Griffin and Family Guy. They were putting in the work to secure the Patriots' biggest win in a decade, and it's about time the team put some respect on their name.
Oh, by the way, Conway Twitty says cut it out. Just write a joke.
And Brian would be happy to see that all his work towards legalizing marijuana in the episode 420 ended up paying off just a few years later after the episode's airing.
Small amount of pot! You're under arrest, dirtbag! Oh, come on!
So after Brian gets arrested for possession, he decides he's had enough hiding who he is and begins a campaign to legalize the substance in quahog. Can't a dog just enjoy the comforts of the devil's lettuce every once in a while? Probably not. I feel like a dog's lungs aren't built to handle that kind of smoke intake, no matter how cool it makes them look.
It is time to make a change.
Thank you.
It's time for quahog to legalize marijuana.
So after some campaigning and a little singing of one of Family Guy's most iconic songs, Brian succeeds in his mission and manages to get pot legalized in quahog.
Legal in quahog. And it's made everything just so great.
This episode would come out in 2009, but Brian's mission wouldn't come true in the real world until years later. In 2022, Rhode Island would officially sign the Rhode Island Cannabis Act into law, legalizing the use of the substance for anyone aged 21 and up. This pretty much gave residents the right to carry a small amount on them at a time, grow the crop in their own home, and open the doors for retailers to sell it through licensed dispensaries. It really is Brian's dream come true. A dream he threw away for his other dream of becoming a famous author. Thankfully, this dream actually benefits everyone and probably causes way fewer headaches.
Settle down, there's enough drugs for everybody.
And when the family's down on their luck and needs some money in the Peanut Butter Kid, Peter makes a suggestion that, if someone had actually followed through on it, may have had them becoming rich later on.
We really gotta figure out a better way to budget for this family's future.
Bitcoin.
What?
I don't know.
So for those of you not in the know and those who are in a coma for the first half of the 2020s, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that allows for pseudonymous control of your finances without the control of a bank or other outside force. Explaining that to someone in 2016 probably just made you look like a huge sci-fi nerd, but for some of the few who decided to invest in it, they would reap the benefits in just a few years. A single Bitcoin was worth about $500 at its peak in 2016. A decent chunk of change, but probably nothing that would change your life. However, if you were to have taken Peter's advice and put a little bit of money into Bitcoin, your investment would have only continued to increase, with Bitcoin hitting its highest value ever in October of 2025, worth $126,198 per coin. Not bad for a little coin that takes the electricity of an entire small nation to mine.
Now let me just check my portfolio. Yes, no, yes, no.
Bitcoin and the greater world of cryptocurrency may seem like somewhat household names now, but in 2016 it was still a relatively niche thing that most viewers of Family Guy might have been unaware of. Perhaps Peter merely uttering the word made the price start to ascend. Maybe Peter is actually the coin's anonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows, but we may have Family Guy to thank and/or curse for helping bring digital currency into the public eye. How are those ugly monkey NFTs doing?
It's important to know I only accept crypto, so Bitcoin, Dogecoin, or Ethereum.
So the family's answer to their crumbling financial predicament is to turn Stewie into a commercial actor, sending him down the very fruitful and occasionally very short life of a child star.
Congratulations, your son is the new Peanut Butter Kid.
My God, I don't believe it.
And Peanut Butter Kid isn't some kind of insider Hollywood nickname either, that I know of. I don't get invited to Hollywood much anymore after canceling every Netflix series after 2 seasons. Stewie becomes the star of a national peanut butter brand, but of course that gravy train only runs for so long, leaving him in need of another gig.
Okay, Stewie, you booked the last commercial without even trying, so this one should be a piece of cake.
Unfortunately, this is not for a cake commercial, so Stewie's wires get a little crossed and he doesn't succeed at the audition. Which means he's gonna have to work even harder to earn the love of his parents, and even then, he'll be lucky if they touch him in a way that doesn't involve smacking him across the head.
Do you get pleasure out of humiliating your family?
Yeah, is there some kind of sick joy in it?
Something tells me Stewie is going to be writing a book very similar to this one in the future if he keeps going down this path. But Brian seems to be the only one aware of the absolute damage being done to the baby.
I just don't think any of this is good for Stewie.
It's great for Stewie. He's becoming a star.
And just like all stars, they're bound to one day fizzle out and die. Stewie's meltdown might just happen a lot quicker than a star's, but it will still probably kill the same number of people. But to prevent this from happening, Brian decides to intervene and get Stewie out of this life, which leads us into our second coincidence to come out of this episode.
Screech from Saved by the Bell, Corey Haim, Dana Plato, then dead.
So Brian's trying to explain to Stewie the unfortunate fate that befalls many child actors, but if you look at the board, you probably notice a gravestone with the letters RIP on it alongside a banner with 3 X's. Some fans theorize that this was a premonition of the death of prominent SoundCloud rapper XXXTentacion, who passed away in 2018, just 2 years after this episode's airing. I know, big stretch on that one, but it's one of those coincidences that people just couldn't help but notice after the fact. And Hollywood has just been making sequels to seemingly everything nowadays. And about 20 years ago, in North by North Quahog, Family Guy predicted that one of the most polarizing films of the early 2000s would follow the same fate.
The Messiah! He's gone. Where did he go?
So in this episode, Peter and Lois stumble across the film reel for director Mel Gibson's next movie, Passion of the Christ 2. This would be a sequel to his 2004 smash independent hit, The Passion of the Christ, a film about the last days of Jesus Christ leading up to his resurrection. The film was viewed as an amazing movie of faith and devotion by some, and 2 hours of absolute brutal misery by others. I guess Mel wanted to make the sequel a bit more of a crowd pleaser, so he went with something a little more like this.
Oh, the Son of God, you sure are a son of a... Whoa!
Yet another cash grab sequel, it seems. Some directors just have no shame. But back in the 2000s, no one really expected there to be a sequel to the film, especially not one with guns and cars. Additionally, Mel Gibson would go through a near career-destroying public breakdown, being caught driving drunk and making various racist and anti-Semitic comments, leaving him blacklisted from the industry for years. But lo and behold, in the 2020s, Mel Gibson announced that 2 sequel films revolving around the resurrection of Jesus were in the works. Nearly 2 decades later, and Jesus is finally making his big return. To the screen, of course. We don't think he'll be teaming up with Chris Tucker like Family Guy thought, but they weren't entirely inaccurate with this prediction.
This July, let he who is without sin kick the first ass.
But a not-so-fun coincidence would occur with the episode Family Guy Viewer Mail number 2, which predominantly featured an actor who would end up dying years later.
Oh my God, you're Robin Williams! Ding! Thank you for playing That's Obvious!
So in the second part of this anthology episode, Peter is struck by lightning and is given the ability to turn anyone he touches into comedian Robin Williams. That's all fun and whatnot for like 5 minutes, but as soon as everyone becomes Robin Williams, Peter can't take it anymore.
You gotta help me! Yo, Peter G, what's happening, dog? Huh.
Now surrounded by Robin Williams during every waking moment of his life, Peter makes a pretty grave decision to escape this hell.
Mwah! Well, I haven't been to temple in a while. Ah!
Yeah, I get how he's feeling. I felt the same way trying to get through Old Dogs. Peter tries anything he can to find sweet release, but it just isn't in the cards for him.
Time to lose some weight, dearie.
Just touch the earth already so they can turn into a giant Patch Adams head that would slowly burn up in the sun and end this nightmare. The episode ends on a pretty somber note, but it wasn't the initial release of this episode that stirred up some controversy. Rather, it was the planned rerun on other stations that had to be adjusted due to tragedy. On August 11, 2014, Robin Williams tragically passed, and the following day, Adult Swim planned to air this episode. While the network succeeded in blocking this episode from airing in the States, BBC 3 ended up airing the episode mere moments before Williams' death was announced. It's a real grim coincidence that was slightly foretold in a way a lot of people weren't really aware of. And another death that was weirdly foretold occurred in Meet the Quagmires, where an alternate future sees certain moments from the past play out a little differently.
You did something that changed the course of your history, causing the timeline to skew off into an alternate tangent.
So when Peter travels back in time to relive his teenage years, he ends up changing the future to one where he isn't married to Lois. Best possible outcome for her, but of course Peter has to go and try and fix everything. But there's far more that has changed other than their marriage. Somehow their not getting together completely changed the political landscape of the country as well.
Al Gore as president. We could kind of just take that one and call it a win.
As great as a future with universal healthcare and low gun violence sounds, Peter would rather throw it all away for a dysfunctional, somewhat unhappy marriage. Whatever, I guess you're the main character for a reason. So they track down Death to send them back in time, and he fills them in on the latest happenings in this alternate future.
Dick Cheney, the chairman of Halliburton, shot Supreme Court Justice Scalia in a hunting accident.
So this is referencing an incident from 2006 when Dick Cheney accidentally shot Texas attorney Harry Whittington during a hunting trip. We already talked about this moment quite a bit in our video about Family Guy's political roast, so we won't go into too much more detail. But basically, this alternate future that Peter and Brian find themselves in has Harry Whittington replaced with Antonin Scalia, who was at the time serving as a Supreme Court justice. Scalia would pass away nearly 10 years later, peacefully passing away in his sleep at the age of 79. So no, he didn't get shot and killed during a hunting trip, but what's interesting is that the afternoon prior to his death, he was on a hunting trip. Cheney missed him by just a few hours, which he was probably upset about. So while it's not a one-for-one example of a one-off moment coming to pass, there are just enough dots to connect that we thought it was worth mentioning. I guess Brian finally got what he wanted all those years later, and I'm sure he feels great about it.
Oh my God, Peter, you can't marry Lois.
I don't know who any of those people are.
And the episode Stuck Together Torn Apart sure did try its best at warning the world about the power of superglue, because they just knew someone would do something dumb with it. And lo and behold, almost 20 years later, someone certainly did.
You can let go of my hand now.
You can let go of mine.
So in this episode, Brian and Stewie end up getting their hands stuck together with a powerful adhesive that advertises that it never comes unstuck. A season or two later, and this probably would have been a dream come true for Stewie, but season 3 still has him hating Brian. I do love a good enemies to lovers storyline.
I'm cleaning myself. You were clean 15 minutes ago, now you're just on vacation.
So the pals just need to live their lives as conjoined twins, or just two really good buddies. Brian will just have to field all those questions about why he's constantly holding a toddler's hand. Look, if we can put a leash on them, then we can probably superglue them to your hand too.
We met on the internet. Shut up. Yes, he lured me down to the park with promises of candy and funny stories.
Sounds like a killer way to spend a weekend. You know, without all of the other implications. But their prayers finally get answered when a solvent that can dissolve the glue finally lands in their hand and their other stuck-together hand.
All right, it says it takes an hour for this solvent to take effect. Well, let's see, what takes an hour?
How about the beloved American pastime of rescuing a little girl from a well? It's a shame this hobby had to die out along with old century stone wells.
I just noticed, how often do you see a 17th century well in this day and age?
Hurry up, the glue's wearing off. All right.
And they manage to save the girl just before the solvent destroys the glue and frees the two, meaning their forced proximity friendship has come to an end. But only if they want it to end.
And we're not stuck together anymore. Thank God. You said it. Do you want to hold hands on the walk home? Yeah, sure.
Seriously, maximum strength glue is no joke and can cause a lot of damage to your body if used incorrectly. More people should have taken this episode as a clear warning, but people continue to use things like Gorilla Glue without properly accounting for just how strong it can be. Perhaps the most well-known case of this came in 2021 when a woman went viral for spraying Gorilla Glue into her hair. There are hairsprays out there advertised as glue hairsprays that allow your hair to stay set all day until you wash it out, but Gorilla Glue is nowhere near as forgiving. The woman received ample amounts of both ridicule and support for her mistake, with some celebrities and medical professionals even chiming in. To be fair, if you don't have a warning on the bottle that specifically tells you not to do something, people are gonna do it. I guess she couldn't get her hands on some wet cement, so this was the next best thing. The woman ended up undergoing a procedure that removed her hair and treated her scalp, finally erasing the solvent from her head. You would think that would be enough of a warning to have people never mess with this stuff, but you can never underestimate the stupidity of the human race. Not long after, a man ended up supergluing a cup to his lip to prove that Gorilla Glue wasn't as strong as people think, which of course led to a trip to the emergency room. Family Guy warned us all the way back in the early 2000s, and only a fool would go against the ancient scriptures like that. But there's also another possible moment of fortune telling that one could identify from this episode.
This next one is for all the ladies out there.
A guy makes a passing comment that technically targets a man's wife, who then takes it upon himself to rush the stage and assault the man with the microphone. Now, where have we heard that one before? Yeah, we know Family Guy wasn't trying to warn us of someone rushing the stage at a big show in 20 years, but the similarities to the cutaway and the infamous Oscar slap from Will Smith to Chris Rock are too funny not to acknowledge.
Keep my name out your mouth! Wow, dude.
And while this next one might be a bit of a stretch, people couldn't help but draw parallels to Stewie and Brian accidentally eviscerating James Cameron in The Wolf of Wall Street to an actual underwater disaster that would happen years later.
I've been looking at stocks all morning. I'm already up 5% on the day. Wow, good for you.
So when Stewie and Brian decide to get into the stock trading game, they end up coming into a decent amount of spending money. Brian could use that money to help enact some of the liberal movements he's always yapping about, but there's actually a much better, much more impactful use of that money.
We're going to go down 20,000 feet and pants James Cameron while he's excavating the Titanic.
That'll teach him for thinking he can get away with making a bunch of blue cat movies. 1 was fine, 2 was enough, but 3? You have severely misread the galactic furry market, my friend. But Stewie and Brian make sure Cameron can never make another one again. Yet another life lesson to be learned from Family Guy. Pantsing someone is no laughing matter. One wrong tug and you'll completely rip a man in half. Seen it happen far too many times on the playground. So while there's no real-life death by hydraulic pantsing situation this could prelude to, many fans of Reddit couldn't help but return to this episode after the tragedy that befell the OceanGate Titan. The Titan was developed as the first privately owned submersible that would give paying customers tours of the wreckage of the Titanic. See, now their first mistake was naming it so similarly to a famous disaster. It'd be like if someone developed a new plane and called it the Hindenburger.
To the Hinden, Peter!
Anyway, the Titan's first voyage of 2023 ended in disaster when the vessel imploded under the pressure of the depths, killing all 5 occupants inside. Like we said, it's not a straight-up premonition of things to come, but Family Guy has, on occasion, warned us about messing around in a world we don't fully understand. But Family Guy would predict that the bad behavior of others would eventually lead to consequences, such as with former television talk show host Charlie Rose, who was getting up to some drunken antics in The New Adventures of Old Tom.
We'll be talking about how much sleep you need to not be drunk from the night before.
That's not what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
The seasoned journalist and talk show host was known for appearing on a myriad of CBS shows, but in November 2017, Rose would be fired from the outlet after a slew of harassment and misconduct allegations dating all the way back to the late 90s started to emerge. Rose would admit that he didn't have the best behavior in his past, but ultimately denied many of the accusations. He was taken to court for a harassment lawsuit, which ended with a settlement, and Rose pretty much leaving the public eye. This all started the year after Family Guy made the joke, so it may be a case of the show knowing that Rose had been up to no good. Another disgraced public figure Family Guy seemingly had the dirt on is Hollywood director Brett Ratner, who Family Guy made a passing jab at in the episode Lego My Mego.
I have 50,000. I have 75,000. Thank you, Brett Ratner.
So to add a little context for this scene, Stewie's being bid on by wealthy, probably not so well-meaning parties, with one of the names being mentioned being Rush Hour and X-Men The Last Stand director Brett Ratner. While this was probably just a joke about his perceived scumminess, I mean, just look at the guy, this didn't have any real-world connotations until 5 years later in 2017, when numerous women came forward accusing Ratner of assault. The director-producer was pretty much blacklisted from the industry after notable figures like Olivia Munn, Natasha Henstridge, and Elliot Page spoke out about the director's actions. But I guess you can't keep him down because he's recently made a comeback by directing a documentary about Melania Trump. But he then appeared in some unearthed pictures from a certain set of files, and suddenly the Family Guy joke is starting to sound less and less like a joke. I guess only time will tell just how accurate this jab from the show was to real life, but it just goes to show that the team might just have more Hollywood dirt than we realize. And another long-run jab that had some real-world implications occurred in the episode Don't Make Me Over, when Stewie made mention to another prominent figure in Hollywood.
Help! I've escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement! Help me!
Now this could have just been a comment on how creepy Spacey could be in films like Seven, but time has proven that reality isn't all that different from fiction sometimes. Okay, Spacey wasn't murdering people in the style of the 7 Deadly Sins, but 12 years later, in 2017, a slew of allegations began to emerge around Spacey, which led to multiple criminal investigations into the actor. Most of these claims came from young men, and the severity of them caused Netflix to cut ties with the House of Cards star, and Hollywood as a whole to more or less force him out. Spacey would ultimately face no charges despite some questionable circumstances, but the damage had already been done. Still, is it possible that Family Guy knew something the rest of the world didn't? The fact that the joke involves Stewie and the fact that Spacey wouldn't come out as gay until much later definitely raises some eyebrows, but I guess all we can do is speculate. And you can probably speculate about another potential jab at a celebrity that would later come to be admonished by society.
How was that, Dr. Diddy?
Yo, that sounded smooth, y'all. I just have a
Of course, this joke was probably just intended to show how underlyingly racist Brian is, but there is a pretty interesting coincidence here. The Dr. Diddy character most likely borrowed the name from hip-hop artist and producer Sean Combs, who at the time was using the name P. Diddy. Either him or Donkey Kong's little buddy. I guess we can't be totally sure. But while Brian might have been barking at him for not the best reasons, he would have been having the correct reaction if this was the real Diddy. As many of you know, Sean Combs was recently involved in multiple lawsuits accusing him of several heinous crimes. While Combs only pleaded guilty to one of the charges, it's still safe to say that his reputation is all but ruined, especially when others in the music industry allege that his crimes have been going on for a long time. Brian must have been in the know. It's too bad he had to be a huge racist at the same time as well.
Oh God, sorry. Oh my God, that is not me. That's not who I am. I vote Democrat.
And the show has always been known for roasting celebrities and actors, but one particular comment from Adam West High ended up foretelling a pretty dark coincidence.
Put up a picture of Sean Hannity.
Can we do that?
Yeah, Tosh does it all the time. Put it up.
Yeah, he does look weird.
So the guys first start by roasting political TV personality Sean Hannity. Nothing out of the ordinary here. That trend is as common as breathing on this show. And making fun of someone's appearance is just so fun that they decide to do it to someone else.
All right, that was fun. Hey, let's do Matthew Perry.
Now the Friends actor is on the chopping block. All of this was done in good faith for the most part, but there's one comment made by Cleveland that has a bit of an eerie foreshadowing behind it.
He looks like he told a genie he wished to be a pool noodle.
Such a hyper-specific descriptor that weirdly enough had a bit of a connection to a future tragedy. In October 2023, 4 years after this episode's airing, Matthew Perry was found dead in a hot tub at his home in California. This came after a lengthy, lifelong battle with addiction, and it's not hard to see a bit of a connection between the event and Cleveland's words. The fact that Perry was found in what you could consider a small pool weirdly lines up with Cleveland's comment about him looking like a pool noodle. Life is just filled with those weird little coincidences that make you have to do a double take.
Hey guys, Friends brings me a lot of joy, so can we stop this?
And perhaps one of the most shocking predictions the show has ever had is when it made a joke about a certain prominent figure that had a hand in one of the most harrowing tragedies the United States had ever seen in Road to Rhode Island.
Sorry, little man, everything gets x-rayed.
Wait, there's really no need to—
So in the episode, Stewie barely makes it through TSA by distracting the agents from seeing the multitude of weapons in his backpack. There used to be a time where you could go through the airport with your death laser, but those days have long passed. So while Stewie makes it through, he does question how easily someone with real evil intent could get through as well.
Let's hope Osama bin Laden doesn't know show tunes.
A bit of an edgy reference for the time period, but what you have to understand is that this episode aired in May of 2000, a full year before the tragic attacks on the World Trade Center. What a lot of people may not remember is that bin Laden was known far before these events, as the man founded Al-Qaeda in the 1980s and had been directly involved in several attacks involving US points of interest. However, this joke is pretty grim in hindsight, as connecting bin Laden to the weak points of the TSA system is startling to see, and even more startling to learn it was made before those terrible events occurred. And our final terrible coincidence comes from a pretty controversial episode, Turban Cowboy, which ended up getting a lot of heat because of an eerie similarity with the Boston Marathon.
I'll tell you, Bob, I just got in my car and drove it. And when there was a guy in my way, I killed him.
So this episode sees Peter running through a multitude of marathoners in his car in order to win. Nothing too out of the ordinary for Peter when he's behind the wheel, but this ended up proving to be a dark look into the future. Just 1 month after this episode's premiere, the tragic events at the Boston Marathon would kill 3 people and injure hundreds. What really got this episode into hot water wasn't even the episode's fault. After the bombing, someone online stitched the footage of the bodies left behind in Peter's wake with the scene of him accidentally detonating a bomb to make it seem like the show had predicted the event to a T. This was quickly debunked, but it did fool quite a few people who hadn't seen the episode. Even without the trickery, this is still a pretty dark coincidence, one that makes people all the more willing to forget this episode ever existed. But is there a moment from Family Guy you think will come true in the future? Let us know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more great Family Guy videos.